you're looking at everything and you have to say, well, what the fuck is this? How the hell did these spheres get here? How did these, eat and poop organisms, single cell organisms, they just eat and poop and reproduce. That's all they do. How did they go from these single cell organisms to these complex organisms forming together and creating a plan to evolve? And this is what we're seeing that they had to do, what must have happened in order for them to evolve. They really had to come together and agree to share food. As I said, agree to live together, agree to go through this whole developmental program and have conscious control of their cells, to redirect their cells to do different things throughout the body in order to evolve into these walking around organisms that we see, today. So think about that. Think about the complicity, the complex nature of, such a job. And, we know, as I said, our body has different organs and, our liver, our heart, what have you. And there are cells that make up these, different parts of the body. So for these organisms to go through such a complex evolution is something that if you wanted to do today, again, this is why they give us these numbers, billions of years, and they decided to do this. But if you wanted to do that today, you would have to engineer it in a lab. It's just that simple. So as I said, something had to introduce these organisms to our planet, and the evolution had to took place probably somewhere else, possibly on this planet, but the ingredients had to be put there, or something had to be put in place or introduced, as I said, in order for this evolution to occur. It is highly unlikely that these stupid eat and poop bacteria was able to organize after 3.5 billion years this complex idea to evolve, and to evolve for what? Now, we've been finding fossilized remains of animals going millions and millions of years back. If we evolved from this missing link, we should have by now found its body. We have not. We have not found the body of the missing link. Not just that, when you look at the chart, you see these evolutionary lines. Look at the primates. You see everything that they came from, We not only, as I said, this line should not be here, it should be gone, but we not only have a missing link, we don't have the evolutionary line that missing link would have come from. So we know something is up here. Okay, so let's cut straight to the point. Bottom line. Human life was not created here on Earth. It had to be created somewhere else. Now, the DNA that we share with these animals was created here. Earth at some point was terraformed. I believe it was terraformed a couple times, and it was terraformed to create the atmosphere that was needed to create first the animal life and then our life to sustain us. And we were put here for whatever reason. We'll get into, much later. We got a lot to deal with. So they terraformed this planet. So we simply can't believe it just happened here and life was only created here. Now, we talked about in part 1 how Earth used to be, possibly used to be one of the moons of Saturn, and how Titan, which is one of the moons of Saturn, also is supposed to be like the planet Earth. When you go and look at Greek mythology, everything involving Greek mythology points to Saturn and its moons. Most of the moons of Saturn is named after Greek gods. We talked about how the ancient Egyptians worshiped Saturn as a sun, not our sun in the sky. So when you look at all the mythology, everything that they're talking about in ancient Kemet is pointing to Saturn as the sun and not the sun in the sky. So you can almost slice the Bible in half. When you have the Old Testament, we know, as I went through before, we know we're talking about Saturn. We're talking about Saturn as a sun. We're talking about Greek mythology. We're talking about the moons of Saturn and everything like that. This is the Old Testament. And then we go into the New Testament, where we're still sort of talking about Saturn, but we're talking about the sun we see today, the sun in the sky, Jesus. We're talking about Saturn as we see it today, but we're also still talking about Saturn as a sun. So when you start getting into the parables of the Bible, you see that this is where it's pointing to. When you start going and looking into secret societies, when you start looking at all the esoteric circles and everything, every single thing points to Saturn. There's no escaping it. There's no way around it. I titled this series Saturn, Satan, and God and the Nature of Reality for a reason, because everything is pointing there. When you go dig into all these mystery schools, it's taking you back to Kemet. And when you study Kemet, you're going to find out about Saturn. You're going to find out about a lot of things. This is by design. So everything seems to be pointing towards Kemet and pointing towards Saturn, except for the dinosaurs. The dinosaurs is pointing towards nothing. You just have these beasts that existed for millions of years, and we don't understand the purpose of their existence, which tells us what? Intelligent life did not begin here on Earth. It's just that simple. It didn't begin here on Earth. This Earth wasn't first prepared for us, but prepared for them, for the dinosaurs and for the animals that was here. It's just that clear. So when you understand that, you understand intelligent life did not begin here. You look at, creation. You look at the woman. And obviously clear, as I talked about, she was put here first. So the thing is, what you really got to ask yourself and you got to think about it is, okay, we can get into, 666 and everything like that, 6 electrons, 6 protons, 6 neutrons, that gives us carbon, that gives us life. We could talk about all that. But, we really just have to take it back to the basic, simple question that we always speak about. If we evolved from primates, as I talked about, how come we are not seeing this evolution now? We are not seeing primates, turn from primates into humans. We're not seeing that. If it's all about 6 electrons, 6 protons, 6 neutrons, 666 and everything like that, if we crawled out of the primordial waters, or whatever you call it, if it's about these elements that came together to create the woman, how come we're not seeing it? We're not seeing women just come into existence out of nowhere. So that tells us that the woman had to be created. She had to be created. It's really going back to that whole saying, as I talked about before, what came first, the chicken or the egg? What came first, the woman or, the baby? And you can't get the baby without the woman. Plain and simple. So again, she had to be created. She had to be made. We are not seeing existence of human beings outside the womb of a woman. It's just not happening. We're not seeing men and women come into creation outside the womb of the woman. The woman brings us into this planet. It's something that we all understand and know. So when you really get into it, and it's just, we bombarded by so much, it's stuff that we really don't think about, but we can settle it all right there with just that question. She didn't birth herself. Everything comes into existence. Every human came into existence by a woman. How did she come into existence? She had to be created. It's just that simple. So we can, right there, just by getting that technical, X out evolution. We can get rid of it. No, we didn't. And I went through all that on YouTube, and I went through all that. That's why I got into this stuff. So when we get to this final part, you will really be able to grasp that. We did not come about through evolution. Plain and simple. When you look at the animals, they have a different consciousness. They have a different comprehension. Plain and simple. Billions of insects and animals on the planet. Not one of them has the comprehension of man. And we understand that because one, you can be driving down the road. Just give you a quick example. And the more you drive, the more roadkill you see. And you have to start thinking to yourself, how stupid can these animals be to not just wait for the cars to go by? I mean, this is your life we're talking about. It's over if you get hit by this car. How dumb can they be, to not just wait till there's absolutely no cars, till they're 100% sure to cross the street. Yet we see countless animals, birds, getting hit by cars, roadkill. We see flies flying right at your car at Mach 10. when you're going down the road, thinking that, your window, they may be able to fly right through and come out the back. And, the consciousness of animals does not equal the consciousness of man. So if we evolve as they did, we will have their consciousness. We do not. But it's clear to see that this planet and the animals that are here, or was here too, was used to create these bodies that we have now. It's just that simple. There's no way around it. You can't look at the ape and not see you. I don't care if you're black or white. The hands look exactly like us. We know. We share these genes and we share this DNA, as I got into. So we are a, unique creation in the universe, plain and simple. I don't think people understand how complex our brain alone is, how complex the human body is. A lot of thought went into the creation of us. We are seriously complicated. This is not something that is just put together out of the blue. We are very complex people. And when you think about something, creating something that has to hold this much energy and a consciousness, it's amazing that they were able to do what they did in our creation. So we understand that we share genes, DNA with animals, and that we also share DNA and genes with whoever our creator is. The thing is, it's really hard to tell exactly where this creation took place, but it obviously didn't take place here on Earth. It had to have taken place somewhere else. So we are told, the Earth is unique, that the Earth is the only planet that can support life, and da-da-da. And then we found out later on that, possibly people live on Mars. There's possibly people living on Titan, which is one of the moons of Saturn. And, of course, the Greek gods, in Greek mythology, the Titans were, in Greek mythology. And a lot of the moons of Saturn are named after those Titans. The Titans were giants. Kronos, the god of Saturn, all that is going into Greek mythology, as I said, not a coincidence. Now, again, I talked about this before, the movie Prometheus. When they go onto that planet, they fly past Saturn and basically land on one of the moons of Saturn, which is where they find out that, aliens created human life. They go into a place that has the atmosphere of Earth, and they find out that these aliens that look, like us, we look like them, created us. And, you can't get much more clear than that and get into the understanding of what that movie is trying to tell us, which is why I use it a lot. And I was shocked at, the fact that they put that movie out the way that they did. It's giving away what a lot of people have already come to realize in esoteric circles a long time ago. As I said, this information is old. It's kindergarten stuff. It's stuff that a lot of people who done their research is going to come to this same conclusion. So for some of you, this information might be like, wow, but this information it's been out here. It's been there. And a lot of people have gotten to that point, which you'll be at the end of this DVD, where you just say, okay, well, I got to learn everything else. There's a lot more to come to it that goes with it, but at least I got to this point where I can understand the situation that's going on, possibly going on here on the planet. So when you step back and start looking at the picture, that we were definitely created and put here on this planet, and everything that, that entails, all the questions that start to pop up when you start dealing with that aspect of us and, our purpose and, why were we created, what's going on and everything like that. Then, all the pieces start to fall into place when you start looking and searching and going back through history and looking at stuff. And as I will show you in this video, and as you will find out through your own research, there are so many different stories, so many different lanes you can go. The only thing you can do is connect the dots and put the pieces together that fit. Because when you get to this level of knowledge and information, when you start getting to this point, the only people that have the 100% true, correct answers, I would say, or the true story, are the powers that be, the people who actually know. As I said, we can only put together where the facts lead us, which is what I have done, and what a lot of people have done. And it's cool because I try to stay away from, this is why I don't really watch too many YouTube videos where I don't watch, I don't really go into too many other people's stuff. And I find out, through a lot of you guys that, when I'm talking about stuff and I put stuff out, that people always say, well, have you read such and such book? They came to the same conclusion. I go and read the book and I'm like, wow. It validates my research to know that, before I came to this conclusion, somebody else had already came to the conclusion, and it validates my research and lets me know that the path that I was on and looking for all this stuff and trying to put together the pieces, I was on the right path blindly, on my own, just trying to figure it out, and was coming to the same conclusion as everybody else. That's validation. That's when you've done right research. You've done research, you followed the breadcrumbs, and it led you to the correct place. So dinosaurs ruled for millions of years during the Triassic, Jurassic, and Cretaceous period. And during that time, while they was ruling, while they was on the earth, there was something going on in the universe. There was Star Wars. So, Star Wars begins a long time ago in the galaxy far, far away. There was, Star Wars. And everything points to it actually being a war in space. So when you go to the Bible, remember the Bible talks about the war in heaven. And, what is heaven? The heavens is basically space, as I talked about before. We understand that the heavens is space. Even when you go into Genesis and read about the firmament and everything like that, it's giving you the hint that the heavens is basically space. So there was this war. Everything points to this war happening. And in the Bible, we know, Satan fought the war, and he was basically banished to earth because of the war and everything like that. And when you understand esoterically who Satan is, esoterically, Satan represents us black people. Now, Satan has many aspects, of course. But, we got to remember the ancient world, and we got to really think about what we seeing, with the ruins and everything. So it's clear as day there was an advanced civilization that existed back then. And, when we look at the pyramids and the ruins that we see all over the world, something like the Great Pyramid, the way we know it today wasn't just built to be, what we see today, a monument just sitting there. There was a function for it, as well as with all the other pyramids around the world. So we know it was a advanced civilization that existed, and they accomplish a lot. And, we get to a point in history where everything just falls off. We get back to the ancient Egyptians, we look at the Sumerians, and we scratching our heads as to what the hell happened. Something happened, and we know something happened on this planet that is explained in the ancient world. And it's so deep. And the reason why it really eludes us is because the truth about it is really hard to fathom, as you'll see in this video. It's hard to digest, it's deep, and it's a lot of information to get into, but it's pertaining to Saturn. And we got to go back and look at all the information about Saturn and the planets and what these different civilizations who all had, so many things in common, who talked about the same things before, organized religion. What was this all about? Now, it's tough for us to comprehend, because we can only comprehend, life as we know it. And that's the thing right there. You got to really think about that. We hear them say all the time, this planet has, no life as we know it. Life as we know it does not exist on this planet. And that's life as we know it. So that doesn't mean we know all life. We don't understand how something could survive in those conditions, but we don't know all life. We don't know all that exists. And this is based off of, machines and computer systems and what's there that can read the planets and actually try to calculate what could possibly live there. But that's based on life as we know it. So this is about to get real deep. We're going to get into this video. So now, the ancient Egyptians talk about life before, the flood. They talk about the old ones and people that existed before them, and they allude to something happening. This is something that we see in a lot of other civilizations where they give us the flood story, and it's all about life before the flood. So now we got to look at it and understand the golden age of man. This is a big deal that we're going to get into, and what the golden age of man was about. The golden age of man was basically understanding the Garden of Eden and what took place before the so-called fall of man, where they, supposedly deceived God. Now, you had bliss. Everything was fine. And that's what they're alluding to in the Bible, where you have, Adam was 930 when he died. So he lived a long time. It's giving you this whole understanding that, there was peace in the garden. Remember, you just eat. There was no death. There was no pain. There was nothing. And then when you go and look at the ancient civilizations talking about this same stuff, they're saying the same thing, that this is a peaceful time. Everybody was eating. They had celebrations. There was no death. There was none of the stuff, no wars, nothing. This is the golden age of man. All right. And then we know something happened to where man fell. And this is what the Bible gets into in Genesis, where we have this, fall of man. And then, we have this whole situation with Adam and Eve. And then they go out and create the people, create us or what have you. And we see what happened to where, sons of God coming to the daughters of men, and we get these giants and everything like that. So we got to understand that the golden age of man is basically up into the flood. And we know there was the war and everything like that. Well, basically what was happening with these beings defying God and being evil and so on and so forth. But this is allegorical. This is a story to really get you to understand what's really taking place here, what's really going on. So now when we read about Hesiod and the Diogenes and what Homer talked about in the Iliad, the Odyssey, they're alluding to, they're talking about the golden age of man, talking about the gods, and there's so much mythology wrapped up in it to give you this understanding. Now, during this golden age, during this time, as I talked about before, Saturn was the sun. It's what all the ancient civilizations are talking about. They're not talking about the sun we know of today. They're talking about Saturn as the sun. Now, read here, it says, Saturn is the source of much occult speculation with many theories surrounding it. This will be both a history and an expansion of the enigmatic entity known as Saturn. Saturn was our first sun, the sun of the Golden Age. In Japanese, Saturn is called Dusei. Dusei is what they say, which means Earth star. Many of the sun gods of ancient history are linked not to our current sun, but to the original sun, to Saturn. In many ancient records, Saturn was referred to as the sun. For example, the ancient Babylonian text describes Saturn as the ghost of the sun. Maya believed that the sun that we see today was different in former times. The Saturn Myth, 1980, is a book by David Talbert, which proposes that ancient myths and traditions describe the planet Saturn as the dominant celestial body in the sky, appearing fixed at the north celestial pole. A number of other writers, sometimes called Saturnists, have described similar scenarios, which have collectively been described as the Saturn theory, or Saturn model, or Saturn thesis. In the book, Saturn, the Ancient God of the Sun, author David Talbert notes an obvious mismatch between Saturn and the Sun in ancient times, and that this mismatch could not be a coincidence. Talbert argues that different figures throughout history deliberately distinguish Saturn from our Sun, calling it the best sun, the original sun, the central sun. In his book, Talbert contends that the evidence assembled in the following pages indicates that within human memory, extraordinary changes in the planetary system occurred. In the earliest age recalled by man, the planet Saturn was the most spectacular light in the heavens, and its impact on the ancient world overwhelming. In fact, Saturn was the one great god invoked by all mankind. The first religious symbols were symbols of Saturn. Saturn was named after the Roman god of agriculture and harvest, while the planet may have gotten its name from its golden color, like a field of wheat. It also had to do with its position in the sky. So as I've shown you guys, many ancient depictions of Saturn, of the planet having two suns. We've seen it before. It's all over the place. It's wrapped up in so much mythology and so much symbolism that a lot of people don't recognize it. They think they're seeing two suns. They don't understand one is Saturn. But that's one of the things we got to do. We got to distinguish and separate the mythology, the mythology from the parables, from the allegories, from the esoteric stuff, and the truth. because it's all mixed up, and it's done so for a reason. A lot of the parables are overlapping. So how we have the Noah's Ark story, but we also have the Book of Enoch, in that story. So there's a lot of overlapping tales, even in the Bible itself, but it's all, mixed up, and it's done this way for a reason, to jumble mumble your mind. And if you're not deep into your studies, you're going to be lost, but you're going to get a lot of clarity in this video. So in Genesis, God creates the earth. And because of this, we exist. And it's one of the hard things you got to do. You got to really go back and try to, separate your mind from those times and look at, you got to be critical, because now we're looking in the Bible, and you got to realize that this is a time where it's talking about worship, but there is no religion. There is no biblical books. There's no religion. So you got to think back to ancient times, and who could they possibly be worshiping? What are they worshiping during this time? So the Bible, you have God going out there and killing people, and so much worship is going on. The whole thing the Israelites are doing is about stopping these people, or taking the lands away from these people who are worshiping these gods. And that's basically the skirmish that's going on. So who or what is being worshipped back then? We look at the ancient Greeks and the ancient Romans, and we understand what they worshiped and what was being worshipped during this time. We know about paganism and worship of nature and everything like that. But as far as the stories, what was being put out, what was they worshiping? And we got to understand, as I said, the golden age of man ended with the flood. This is the flood we can't deny happened, because everybody's talking about it. This is stuff outside of biblical religion, which is where they got it from. So, golden age ends with the flood. And the Bible is trying to tell us something, like, something happened. And it's telling us about, these evil people and so-called Nephilim or what have you, and God basically having to destroy the world. But you got to look deeper into that, because it's telling us that something happened. And because this happened, they had to start all over. But it's important, because we can't mix up what's being worshipped in the Bible with what's being worshipped in history as we know it. So we know back then, the ancient Greeks, the ancient Romans was worshiping the planets. The planets was called gods, and they basically made these mythologies off of these planets and turned them into, beings, right? So we have this worship, and we got to understand that for the real part of it, where we at, the us side. Then we have the biblical side, and we have the story with Noah's Ark, right? So Noah's Ark, we know the story. And now we got to get into the esoteric part of it, which is not in the Bible. It's in the Book of Enoch. So it says, the Book of Enoch, Black Adam, albino Noah, and the image of God. Was everyone on the planet black before Noah's flood? The Book of Enoch seems to indicate that the world before Noah's flood was a much darker place, as far as melanin is concerned. While the Book of Enoch is not considered canon, official scripture, it was very important to the ancient Hebrews. In fact, it was so important that they hid it among the Dead Sea Scrolls at Qumran. Let's start by looking at the story concerning Noah's birth. After a time, my son Methuselah took a wife for his son Lamech. She became pregnant by him and brought forth a child, the flesh of which was white as snow. I'll start right there. Now it's giving us a lot in this story. So you have God basically saying, we're going to create the white man. Then we're going to destroy the world and start all over. And, we got different accounts of this. And, we got Deucalion Fair with the Greeks. We got the Epic of Gilgamesh, which we'll get into. And it's telling us about, in Book of Enoch, God creating this mutation and God creating this flood. And this flood story is heard, around the world. And it's something that we really got to look at, because it's deep as it pertains to Saturn. So we have Roman mythology, we have Greek mythology, and it basically telling us the same thing with, basically different names. So you have in Roman mythology, we have Jupiter, and Jupiter is God. And you have Zeus in Greek mythology, he's basically Jupiter. And we have Zeus Ammon, as I showed you guys. We also have Jupiter Ammon. And the whole thing is, Jupiter is a planet. We know that. So what is it talking about? We have these stories, this mythology, and they're basically putting these planets, these beings into, human form or, God form, looking like men. and giving us these stories. And it's one of the things that just, we don't know no better. We're just thinking like, okay, is this stuff really happening out there? Is this dude really existing? Is a dude Jupiter that's all powerful? Or is it talking about planets, this esoteric? What is going on? What is it alluding to? And that's the thing. What is it talking about with Jupiter being a god, Zeus being a god? What is it really about? And that's one of the things that they don't really elab on. And you got to get deep into the story, which the stories is kind of mixed up and it's giving you different representations. But this is important. Jupiter is the biggest key, to understanding the Saturn mythology.